Welcome once again to the Brownstone, Wolfe's sanctuary of logic, orchids, and murder. Do tell us where in the world you're listening from, and don't hesitate to share your thoughts. If you enjoy these cases, consider liking and subscribing. Now then, shall we begin? Nero Wolfe and the case that solved the wrong murder. I was halfway through a sandwich I didn't like when the phone decided to have hysterics. It had the shrill, panicked ring of something trying to confess a crime. Fritz had gone to bed after informing me that no civilized man ate cold tongue with mustard after midnight, and Nero Wolfe had retired upstairs to his lair an hour earlier, leaving me and my sandwich to make peace with each other. I gave the phone 3 rings, Wolfe's rule, and then picked up. "Browns," I began, but the voice that cut me off was female, brittle with terror and class. "You must listen, please, before it happens. I'm going to confess to a murder, but it hasn't—" Static swallowed the next words. I caught a gasp, maybe a sob. "Hold it," I said. "Who is this? Confess to whom?" "To you, Mr. Goodwin. Is that right? The wrong man is in the blue room. Don't—" A click. Deadline. I stared at the receiver a moment, the kind of silence that makes wallpaper look guilty. Then I set it down gently, as though the dial might bite. A murder that hadn't happened yet. Someone was getting ambitious. I gave it 60 seconds for sanity to return, then went to the hall and pressed the buzzer that summoned Fritz from the land of Swiss dreams. When he appeared, his robe cinched with military precision, I said, "Sorry to rattle the Alps, but where's our mountain?" "Herr Wolfe retired at 11. He can wake at 12. Emergency." Fritz looked pained. Waking Wolfe after bedtime ranked between arson and treason. But he went. I poured coffee to bribe my conscience. By the time Wolfe's elevator hummed down, I'd switched on the office lights and straightened my tie in case I needed to look responsible. He emerged in his yellow silk pajamas and a frown heavy enough to tax. "Archie," he said, "if this is not a matter of life and death, preferably someone else's, you will regret disturbing my repose." "Then you'll be tickled. We may have both." I gave him the story straight. The voice, the fear, the phrase about the wrong man in the blue room. He listened, eyes half closed, fingers steepled on the globe of his belly. "A woman you do not know telephoned to confess to a crime uncommitted. You are certain you heard correctly." Unless my sandwich was hallucinating. "Pfui, you are suggestible. Has it occurred to you that the lady might be deranged or rehearsing for a broadcast melodrama?" If she was rehearsing, the sound effects were first-rate. He grunted, which meant the argument was pending, not won. "What precisely do you propose?" "Trace the call." "Impossible at this hour." "Saul Panzer can do impossible before breakfast." "No, you will not rouse Mr. Panzer. You will not so much as dial another number until morning. Our employment does not extend to rescuing anonymous hysterics." That was Wolfe, the human glacier. Still, I saw a flicker under the ice. Curiosity, the thing he denied like other men denied sin. "Sure," I said. "We'll just wait for the murder she promised. Maybe it'll deliver itself by parcel post." He tugged the bell cord for Fritz. "Beer." "You can't drink beer at 1 a.m. "I can," he said. "You may abstain." While Fritz fetched the bottle and glass, Wolfe lowered himself into the red leather chair, the throne of patience, and shut his eyes. "You will make a memorandum of the call, time, phrasing, your impressions. In the morning we shall examine the newspapers. If your clairvoyant proves substantial, we will consider an inquiry. Until then, bed." I made the note, more to spite him than to please him, and when I looked up again he was asleep, mid-beer. I took the bottle away so Fritz wouldn't see evidence of blasphemy against barley, then went upstairs. Sleep and I had a strained relationship even on quiet nights. On nights when women promised future murders, we didn't speak. At 4 I surrendered, dressed, and called Saul. "Panzer," he said, voice calm as always, "how would you like to chase a ghost through the Manhattan switchboard?" "Depends on the fee." "Wolfe doesn't know he's paying yet. Call came to us a little after midnight. Woman, scared, claimed a murder's coming. Can you sniff the source?" "Maybe. Give me 15 minutes and the exchange prefix." By 5 he'd traced it to a public booth near Columbus Circle. Rain-soaked, abandoned, useless. Typical. I stood there under the awning of the shuttered drugstore, watching taxis glide through puddles like black eels. Manhattan looked washed but not clean. Saul's hat dripped steady as conscience. "You think she did it?" he asked. "If she did, she's ahead of schedule." When we split, Dawn was trying to climb out of the Hudson, pale and embarrassed. I grabbed the early edition of the Gazette from a corner stand. The headline hit me like cold seltzer. "Socialite found dead in Riverside Drive apartment." Below it, the photo of a blonde with eyes that had known mirrors too well. I read the caption, "Eleanor Vance, heiress to the Vance shipping fortune." The rest blurred. I'd heard her voice, or someone like it, hours earlier. I drove home through the rain that wouldn't quit and parked the Heron coupe in the alley. Inside, the brownstone was still dark except for a stripe of light under Wolfe's office door. That meant he hadn't gone back to bed, which was rare enough to qualify as news. He was at his desk in the same pajamas, robe added, the Gazette open before him. The beer glass was empty. He looked up as I entered, one eyebrow climbing the skyline. "You have seen it," he said. "Front page, Eleanor Vance. The blue room could fit. A penthouse, powder blue walls. Kramer'll be thrilled." He gestured at the paper. "You are certain the voice was hers?" "Unless Park Avenue has an echo chamber." He exhaled through his nose. "So, the confession anticipated the event by several hours. Either coincidence or a deception more intricate than I relished before breakfast." "We could ask the lady," I said, "if she weren't dead." He closed the paper carefully, as though folding a corpse's hands. "Archie, your zeal is commendable but misdirected. We have no client, no fee. The police will manage." "Sure," I said. "They'll manage to arrest the wrong man in the blue room." His eyes flicked to me, dark with warning. "That phrase again. Explain." She said it, exact words. "The wrong man in the blue room." Maybe it's a tip, maybe a riddle you intend to solve, unless you beat me to it. Pfui, childish obstinacy, yet. He leaned back, fingertips pressed. The phrase implies substitution, perhaps mistaken identity, perhaps deliberate misdirection. Or maybe she was just afraid of the wrong guy. He sighed, a sound somewhere between surrender and digestion. "Very well. You may contact Mr. Cohen at the Gazette and request a full account of the discovery, but you will not interfere with Inspector Kramer's investigation unless invited." Invited? Kramer invites like a dentist. He ignored that. "Breakfast at 8. I require coffee, eggs, and silence until then." That was dismissal. I left him to it and went to the kitchen where Fritz was orchestrating bacon. "Herr Goodwin," he said reproachfully, "you have disturbed the master's sleep. Now his digestion is in peril." "So's mine," I said. "If you want to keep yours safe, double the coffee." At 8, Wolfe emerged, freshly groomed, which meant Fritz had managed to coax him through hygiene without bloodshed. He seated himself, inhaled the aroma, and began demolishing his eggs with philosophical calm. "You are agitated," he observed. "That's right. There's a dead woman uptown who telephoned me for help 6 hours before it happened. That's the kind of thing that keeps a fellow lively. And you intend to pursue it. You're catching on." He dabbed his lips. "Very well. You may investigate, but under my direction. We will not trespass upon police prerogative, yet we shall not abdicate reason. Proceed with discretion. Report hourly." That was Wolfe's idea of permission, mine of victory. By 9 I had Lon Cohen on the line. He owed me favours, mostly for quotes that hadn't burned him. Lon said the body had been found around 2 by a maid. No signs of struggle. A smashed glass near the sofa, coral lipstick print. I thanked him and hung up, the phrase "blue room" drumming like a snare. Wolfe watched me from behind his coffee cup. "Satisfied?" "Not yet. The confession's real, the woman's dead, and someone's framing a ghost." "Then, Archie," he said, "you will be busy. I am not to be disturbed until 11. The orchids require me, which is more than I can say for the NYPD. He rose, graceful as a continent shifting, and moved toward the elevator. Halfway in, he paused. "Be prudent. If this matter proves dangerous, you will withdraw. I will not tolerate your corpse as evidence." It wasn't exactly affectionate, but coming from Wolfe, it was practically a sonnet. "Sure," I said. "If anyone starts shooting, I'll duck behind your ego." The elevator doors closed on what might have been a grunt or a laugh. I poured another coffee, stared at the rain now silvering the office windows, and wondered what kind of woman called a stranger to confess the future. Outside, a siren moaned down 35th like the world rehearsing for Judgment Day. Inside, the brownstone felt too still. I reached for the phone to ring Saul again. Somewhere out there was the wrong man in the blue room, and maybe the right woman already beyond help. The line hummed, steady and blank, waiting. It kept humming until the sky traded charcoal for pewter and pewter for daylight. The morning sunlight on Riverside Drive had the decency to look expensive. It dripped down the facades of the apartment houses like warm champagne, polishing brass doors that had seen more scandals than confessions. I parked the Heron coupe half a block away, straightened my tie, and took stock of my credentials. One forged press card from the Gazette, one grin cultivated for skeptical doormen, and one headache named Nero Wolfe who didn't yet know I was here. The Vance building was the sort of place where rent receipts came embossed in gold. A doorman built like the Fort Knox gatekeeper sized me up, so I flashed the card and my best approximation of journalistic fatigue. Archibald Goodwin, Gazette Crime Desk, here to get background before the noon edition. Mr. Kramer's office said the press would have 10 minutes. That last line was pure invention, but his eyes softened at the name. Everybody in New York had heard of Kramer, mostly because he could outgrowl a taxi engine. The doorman grunted and waved me toward the elevator. I made it to the 12th floor before my conscience caught the next car down. The apartment door stood open, guarded by a uniform whose shoes still believed in polish. Inside, death had money's perfume, orchids in a vase, the faint echo of last night's orchestra on a radio not quite turned off, and a rug thick enough to bury secrets in. Eleanor Vance lay near the divan, pale and finished, wearing a silk robe the colour of surrender. A crystal glass on the low table glimmered with a single lipstick print, coral, bright enough to whistle. I filed that under strange because every photo I'd seen of her in the society pages showed her loyal to deep crimson. Women like that didn't change shades without reason. I moved through the room like a guest who'd lost his invitation. The famous blue room lived up to billing, powder blue walls, matching velvet drapes, a ceiling painted with clouds that hadn't saved her. A vase had fallen, scattering roses across a carpet that looked like it might sue for damages. The telephone rested on a small mahogany table. Beside it lay a pad with one indented word, Carlin. I touched it, memorized it, and left it exactly as found. Wolfe's rule, never pocket the original sin, only remember the script. The coroner's men were still murmuring over the body when the front door coughed smoke and temper. Inspector Kramer entered like a man already out of patience. His coat was wrinkled, his cigar was losing the argument with gravity, and his eyes narrowed when they found me. "Goodwin," he said, "what are you doing here? Don't tell me Wolfe finally bought himself a newspaper." "Not yet," I said. "He's still working on Conquering Breakfast. I'm here on background, public interest, civic virtue, all that." "Virtue, my eye." He chomped on the cigar. "Wolfe send you?" "He doesn't know I'm awake. I like to surprise him. It keeps him young." Kramer snorted and waved a detective over. "Check his pockets. If he's got a camera, throw him out the window." The detective looked ready to oblige, but Kramer's bark was mostly habit. He turned back to me. "All right, Mr. Virtue. Since you're here, make yourself useful. You claim she phoned you last night." "Not exactly her. At least I can't swear to it. A woman called around midnight, said she was about to confess to a murder that hadn't happened yet, mentioned the wrong man in the blue room, sounded terrified. Line went dead." Kramer's jaw flexed. "You sure you weren't dreaming?" "I haven't had a dream since Prohibition." He growled low, then signaled his men to hold off bagging evidence. "All right, let's see if your fairy tale matches the timeline. Coroner says she's been dead about 2 hours when you got your call. That puts it near 10:30. Then either your coroner's watch runs slow or somebody staged a post-mortem encore. She was alive at midnight." He grunted again, chewing smoke like it was information. "You realize what this sounds like? A hoax. Maybe somebody wants to yank Wolfe's chain." "They can yank mine." Wolfe's chain would snap back. I took a slow walk around the sofa while he dictated notes. The body had been moved an inch or two. Carpet marks betrayed it. The coral glass sat too near the right hand for comfort. Maybe someone had tried to fix the scene and ran out of courage. Kramer watched me. "Find something?" "Just admiring the interior design. Money can't buy taste, but it rents a convincing imitation." He ignored that. "You said blue room." Everyone in this apartment calls this one the Blue Room. Convenient coincidence, don't you think? Or a signal. Maybe she knew where it would happen. You're stretching. Sure, I said, but sometimes stretching reaches things. The coroner closed his bag with the sound of finality. Kramer dismissed him and leaned over the glass. You notice anything odd here? Plenty, but I'll let you pick first. He studied the lipstick print, frowned. She usually wore darker red. My wife reads those society columns. You surprise me, Inspector. Didn't take you for the fashion page type. He puffed smoke in my direction. Sometimes it pays to keep up with your enemies. Anyway, whoever used that colour was here after she died, or before she changed her shade. Either way, it stinks. You think it's another woman? Or a man who doesn't know his rouge from his motive? That was Kramer's brand of humour. I decided not to compete. While he barked instructions to Stebbins, who was grumbling near the door, I eased toward the phone table again. The notepad glowed at me like temptation. Carlin. A lawyer, if my memory served. I pretended to adjust my hat brim while my eyes traced the name's groove. The pencil impression had the faint flourish of someone used to signatures. I let it be, but etched it in memory's safe. Kramer turned back. So, what's Wolfe's angle? He doesn't have one yet, but if he did, it'd probably involve outthinking you before lunch. Ha! Tell him to keep his orchids out of police business. He paused, eyes narrowing again. Still, that timeline bothers me. If your call came when you say, our coroner's off by hours, either that or this woman had an echo. Maybe the clock stopped with her heart, I said. He grunted approval for effort, if not logic. Then his tone softened by a fraction, which for Kramer was a bouquet. Look, Goodwin, I don't like civilians wandering my scenes, but you've got good ears. If Wolfe digs something up, tell him to send it through channels, and tell him this one's already crowded. Press, DA, and now you. Sure, I'll send flowers to the crowd. He gave me a long look, then stalked out, Stebbins trailing like a loyal bulldog. The door clicked shut, leaving the silence of expensive emptiness. I stood there another minute, cataloguing impressions, the smell of powder and perfume, a small run in the rug where a heel had caught, a framed photo on the mantel, Eleanor Vance with a smiling man in evening dress, label on the frame reading Holden, probably the fiancé Kramer would soon interrogate. He looked the part, square chin, polished grin, the kind of man who sent orchids because roses were too common. As I turned to go, the maid stepped hesitantly from the kitchen, apron trembling. You're with the police. Something like that. You were here last night? No, sir. I came at 9 this morning. Miss Vance usually rings for breakfast, but the phone kept ringing without answer. I had a key. When I came in, her voice broke. She never even lit the fire. Did she have visitors yesterday evening? I heard voices when I left. Hers and Mr. Carlin, her lawyer. He was upset. There it was again. I thanked her, gave her my card, and told her to expect Kramer's men. Then I stepped into the hallway, whistling softly. The wrong man in the blue room had company, and maybe a lawyer who didn't like his client's colour scheme. By the time I hit the lobby, the doorman looked curious. Find what you needed, mister? Plenty, I said. Now I just have to explain it to a man who hates explanations. Outside, the noon sun had turned the rain of last night into a glittering hangover. I drove straight back toward West 35th Street, rehearsing how to break the news to Wolfe without earning a lecture on professional ethics. He'd know I'd bluffed my way past Kramer again, and he'd call it intemperate adventurism. He'd be right, but that wouldn't stop me. When I reached the brownstone, Fritz met me at the door, wiping his hands on a towel. The master is in the office. He says lunch will be served promptly at 1. You have 17 minutes to wash and repent. Tell him I'll repent later. Murder first, hygiene second. He winced and retreated. I entered the office. Wolfe was already at his desk, dictionary open beside the Gazette, looking like civilization's last defense against disorder. You have news? He asked without looking up. Plenty. The blue room exists. So does a glass with coral lipstick that doesn't belong to our dead heiress, and a notepad with the name Carlin. That got his attention. The brows rose. Carlin? The attorney? Curious. That's one word. Another is suspicious. Indeed. You were, of course, forbidden to interfere with official business. Right. I just went sightseeing. He exhaled, part exasperation, part pride, and rang for Fritz. Beer, he said. Then to me, We shall dine at 1 and deliberate at 2. Until then, you will write a full account of your sightseeing. Accuracy, not embroidery." "Sure," I said, sliding into my chair and pulling the typewriter close. "But if you ask me, Wolfe, this one's going to need more than punctuation." He gave me a glacial look that might have frozen the Hudson. "Archie, restraint is not your native virtue. However, it may yet preserve your employment." "So long as it preserves lunch," I said. Fritz entered with the tray. Wolfe poured the beer, savouring its foam like a sacrament. "You will find, Archie, that truth, like beer, must be served cold." "Maybe," I said, tapping the keys, "but sometimes it needs shaking first." The typewriter began to chatter, the brownstone filled with the smell of hops and ink, and somewhere uptown the blue room waited for the next confession. I typed a clean summary for the files, then grabbed my hat. By late morning, with Wolfe's grudging go-ahead in my pocket and Lon's background notes in my head, I headed for Madison Avenue to see what Julius Carlin looked like when someone else held the pen. By the time I reached Madison Avenue, the morning had acquired that polished Manhattan shine that makes you think money's a climate. The law offices of Carlin and Tate occupied an entire floor of a building that had marble ambitions and brass nerves. The directory downstairs read like a hymn to billable hours. I rode up in an elevator that smelled faintly of cigars and secrecy, rehearsing the lie Wolfe had written for me, something halfway between routine inquiry and strategic provocation. The reception area was all walnut paneling and moral fatigue. A secretary sat behind a desk that could have doubled as a fortress wall. She was the kind of woman who probably ironed her conscience daily, ice blonde, silver glasses, and a voice chilled to preservation temperature. "Mr. Carlin is not receiving visitors," she said without looking up. "That's fine," I told her. "I'm not a visitor. I'm a client." She glanced up then, measuring me in column inches. "And your name, sir?" "Goodwin. Archie Goodwin, representing Nero Wolfe." That got the faintest crack in the ice. No melt, just a tremor. She reached for the intercom and pressed the button like she was detonating a mine. "Mr. Carlin? Someone from Mr. Wolfe." There was a long pause, then a crisp male voice. "Send him in." The inner office looked like a museum for power. Walnut walls, heavy drapes, 2 oil paintings of ships sailing toward profit. Julius Carlin himself sat behind a desk the size of a small yacht, trim and grey at the temples, his expression that of a man who'd long since stopped believing in coincidence. He gestured with a hand holding a cigarette, and smoke curled up like punctuation. "Mr. Goodwin, Nero Wolfe's legman. I'm surprised." "I hear that a lot. I'm also frequently delightful." He smiled without humour. "I doubt that. What does Wolfe want?" "Information," I said, taking the chair without waiting for an invitation. "About your late client, Eleanor Vance." He studied the ash at the end of his cigarette as if it might offer legal advice. "Tragic," he said. "She was my client, yes, but not for long." "How long?" 2 months. She came to me about an inheritance dispute, minor. She was impulsive, emotional, easily swayed by suggestion." "By whose suggestion?" "Her fiancé's, Peter Holden. The man has expensive tastes and little restraint. She mentioned indiscretions, but before anything formal was filed, she withdrew." I leaned back. "She withdrew, or you pushed her?" He looked up sharply. I advised her that pursuing scandal would ruin her social position. She agreed. "Interesting, because she's now dead, and rumour says she was blackmailing someone. Maybe Holden, maybe you." His composure cracked just enough for me to notice the tremor in his left hand. He stubbed the cigarette too quickly, missing the tray. "That's absurd." "Absurd's popular lately," I said. "Inspector Kramer's probably using it for headlines." That got me a glare sharp enough to slice statutes. "If you came here to accuse me, I came here to ask questions. The accusations are free." He rose, buttoning his jacket, trying to retrieve dignity. "Miss Vance was alive the last time I saw her, around 9 o'clock the night she died." "Funny. The coroner says she was dead before 10:30. That gives you less than 90 minutes to be innocent." His jaw tightened. "You're insinuating—" "I'm suggesting," I said, "that your watch and the coroner's should have a conference." He reached for the intercom. "This interview is over." "Hold on, one more thing." I reached into my coat pocket and took out a folded clipping, Lon Cohen's column about Holden's blackmail case. You represented Holden too, didn't you? Small world. He didn't answer, but his silence was the expensive kind. I laid the clipping on his desk. According to this, I said, Holden claims he was dining at the 21 Club when Miss Vance died. Nice alibi, but the receipt timestamp shows the meal ended at 10, not 11. That means he could have left with time to spare, say, to visit a lady who'd become inconvenient. Carlin's eyes flicked to the clipping and back. That receipt means nothing. He stayed for drinks afterward, witnesses confirm. Sure, I said. Maybe you'll testify for him. His voice dropped an octave, cold now. You're out of line, Goodwin. I'm usually out of line. That's why Wolfe keeps me. He started toward the door, then stopped, shoulders rigid. Miss Vance was ill, nervous, unstable. She threatened exposure, of what I never learned. But she died before she could do harm, to herself or anyone. That's touching, I said, and convenient. He turned, finally losing the lawyer mask. You can tell Wolfe this. I have clients whose reputations are worth more than his orchids. If he intends to drag their names into scandal, he'll regret it. I'll pass that along, but between you and me, Wolfe doesn't scare easily. You might want to save the threats for someone who bills by the hour. His lips thinned. Good day, Mr. Goodwin. I left him to his walnut fortress and moral fog. Outside, the secretary gave me a smile that belonged in a safety deposit box. Cold, polished, unreachable. Find what you needed? She asked. Just enough to make trouble, I said. Thanks for your help, even though you didn't. The elevator operator gave me a look that said he'd overheard half the argument and understood none of it. I tipped him a dime anyway. It's good practice when you might need a character witness later. Outside, Madison Avenue was a river of cabs and self-importance. I lit a cigarette and scanned the street. Across the avenue, leaning against a lamppost like it was on retainer, was Saul Panzer. Flat cap, grey suit, expression mild as milk. He drifted over when I nodded. Anything? He asked. Plenty. Our friend Carlin's nerves are playing castanets. Follow him when he leaves. See where his conscience goes for lunch. Saul's eyes flicked up toward the office windows. He's edgy enough to move quick. Good. Maybe he'll lead us somewhere worth sweating. Warehouse rumours still hold. Pier 49. Shipping company office in name only. My guess. Something more private inside. Saul gave a slow nod. I'll trail him careful. You heading back to the plant? Yeah. Wolfe's probably timing his beer pour, and I'd hate to interrupt a man's religion. He grinned faintly and peeled off down the street as I headed for the curb. My taxi driver looked like he'd been trained in a demolition derby, but I climbed in anyway and pointed him toward West 35th. When I got back, the brownstone smelled of lunch in progress. Fritz's doing. The office door was half open and Wolfe was already there, planted in his chair like a mountain with paperwork erosion. He didn't look up as I entered. You've seen Carlin? Yeah, I said, dropping into my chair. He's got the moral flexibility of a pretzel. Claims the heiress was unstable and Holden's as innocent as champagne. His hands were shaking like a man allergic to truth. Wolfe raised a brow, but not his head. Evidence? None yet, but Saul's tailing him. Carlin's heading for Pier 49. That made him look up. Pier 49? Holden Shipping maintains an office there. Yeah, maybe they ship more than cargo. He considered that, eyes half closed. It aligns. The woman was a threat to expose a fraud. Carlin admits as much. If she knew of falsified ledgers or diverted funds, she was about to sing, and someone cut the number short. He nodded slowly, almost approving. Precisely, but the wrong man may yet bear the blame. Meaning Holden? Meaning whoever Carlin designates to protect his client. The man fears consequence, not guilt. It is a common but perilous substitution. I poured myself coffee from the side table pot. You think Carlin's playing scapegoat manufacturer? An apt phrase, Wolfe said. Yes, his pattern fits. A dying woman cannot refute a lawyer's reconstruction, and the police will grab the nearest living suspect who looks photogenic. Kramer'll love it. Wolfe's lips twitched. Indeed. We sat in silence for a moment, each chasing thoughts down different alleys. The clock ticked toward 1. Upstairs, the faint hum of the elevator announced Fritz's punctual approach to lunch. Archie, Wolfe said, when Mr. Panzer reports, you will accompany him to Pier 49. Discreetly. Discreetly's my middle name. Your middle name, he said, is Hyperbole. Close enough for the phone book. He gave a short sigh, half irritation, half fondness. Very well. Until then, lunch. Fritz entered, carrying a tray of perfection and propriety. Wolfe examined the poached salmon with the reverence of a man inspecting scripture. Join me, he said curtly. I'll pass. Got a date with a sandwich and my typewriter. As you wish. He raised his glass of chilled beer, inspecting the bubbles. Archie. Yeah? Be cautious. Carlin's fear may be contagious. It wasn't quite concern, but for Wolfe it was practically affection. I grinned. I'll wear gloves. The elevator hummed again as Fritz withdrew. Wolfe turned back to his meal, already lost in analysis and sauce béarnaise. I sat down at the typewriter, rolled in a sheet, and started the report for the files. The title line read, Carlin, Julius, the wrong man. The keys clattered, the scent of salmon drifted, and somewhere down by the piers the city's conscience kept its secrets under lock and ledger. There are a lot of places I'd rather be at midnight than a fog-soaked pier that smelled like wet rope and bad bookkeeping. For instance, home. Preferably in a chair, preferably dry, and preferably with my name not on any police blotter. But Saul Panzer had that look of patient competence that makes you feel silly arguing, and I wasn't about to explain to Wolfe that I'd chickened out because the Atlantic was giving me dirty looks. Pier 49 crouched at the edge of the river like a guilty conscience, lamps burning low, mist curling through the air like someone had forgotten to turn off the smoke machine. The shipping office squatted at the far end, its windows blacked out, one faint bulb glowing behind frosted glass. Saul and I ducked behind a stack of crates marked Holden Shipping and Export. You sure he came here last night? I whispered. Saul nodded once. Carlin. 10:30 sharp, left around 11. He was nervous, looked like a man trying to shake his shadow. Well, tonight he's getting a sequel, I said, tugging my hat brim lower. Let's make it short before the harbour police decide we're staging a union protest. The side door lock was old enough to remember Prohibition and came open under Saul's fingers like it missed company. Inside, the air was thick with old ledgers, salt and dust that didn't believe in retirement. We moved past file cabinets and steel desks to a smaller room with a green-shaded lamp and a wall safe disguised as a filing drawer. Saul tapped his light against the wood. False back, he said. I nodded, keeping one ear on the harbour sounds, chains, water, a distant foghorn moaning like a conscience. When Saul pried the panel loose, we found a shallow drawer packed with folders. Half of them were burned at the edges, as if someone had staged a little bonfire and lost his nerve halfway through. One sheaf of papers still smelled faintly of smoke. I held it to the lamplight. Numbers, columns, and at the bottom of a page, scrawled in a brisk, confident hand, Blue Room, Friday. I felt the hair rise at the back of my neck. That handwriting looked familiar to you. Saul adjusted his cap. I've seen Carlin's signature on the Bar Association roster, same slant. Well, well, I said. Looks like our lawyer moonlights as a pyromaniac accountant. We spread a few sheets on the desk. They were shipping manifests, only the shipments didn't match the customs reports Wolfe had filed away upstairs. Half the cargo listed never left port. The other half was billed to non-existent consignees. It was a neat racket. Fictitious exports, phantom profits, all wrapped in ledgers tidy enough to fool the tax boys. Saul gave a low whistle. No wonder somebody killed to stop this. Maybe, I said, but Wolfe's going to want more than numbers. He'll want proof these were cooked under Carlin's supervision. Saul tilted the lamp, illuminating the charred edges. If you can read the dates, they line up with Holden's blackmail trouble. Same week. I slid one of the burned sheets into a large envelope and replaced the rest. Wolfe's rule: don't steal the play, just the program notes. That's when a floorboard creaked somewhere behind us. Saul's hand went to his coat pocket where he kept something small, fast, and legal in the right counties. I motioned for silence. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, then a voice that belonged to sandpaper and skepticism. Well, if it isn't Goodwin, Pearlie Stebbins said. And here I was thinking I'd find smugglers. Turns out I was right. He stepped into the light with two uniforms behind him, his fedora tilted forward like he'd been born with it. His overcoat dripped fog. Evening, Pearlie, I said. You patrolling the waterfront or moonlighting as the moral majority? He grunted. What's in the envelope? Recipes. Fritz is expanding his repertoire. He held out a hand the size of a shovel. Hand it over. I hesitated just long enough to make him think about warrants. It's a photostat for Wolfe. If you want the original, it's still in that drawer. He opened it, looked, then glared. You've been tampering with evidence. Correction, I said. Discovering evidence. If it weren't for us, you'd be out here arresting seagulls. Keep it up, he said, and I'll have you explaining jokes downtown. Before I could answer, a heavier tread echoed from the corridor. Inspector Kramer entered, cigar already lit and temper preheated. His coat collar was turned up against the mist, and he looked like a man trying to quit patience cold turkey. What in hell, he began, are you doing in my crime scene? I didn't know you'd bought it, I said. We were just sightseeing. He looked from me to Saul to the half-burned papers, his mouth flattening. You picked a fine place for tourism. This warehouse is tied to Holden Shipping, which means it's tied to our dead heiress. You want to explain why you're knee-deep in her ledgers? I could, I said, but it'd ruin the suspense. Kramer took a step forward, exhaling a wreath of smoke. Don't get cute, Goodwin. I've got enough trouble with the DA breathing down my neck. If Wolfe thinks he can conduct private raids on city property, he's due for a subpoena. Subpoenas make him sleepy, I said. But maybe this'll wake him. I pointed at the ledger page. Recognize the handwriting? He bent over, squinting. Carlin's? Bingo. Our lawyer pal cooked books better than Fritz cooks lamb, and he's been burning the evidence. Kramer looked at Stebbins. You searched this place yesterday. Yeah, but not that drawer. It's a false back. Kramer muttered something that might have been prayer or profanity. All right, Goodwin. You and Pantzer clear out. Leave the papers. If Wolfe's got something real, he can tell me himself. That's generous, I said. You usually charge extra for courtesy. He jabbed the cigar in my direction. One more wisecrack and I'll make you do paperwork. I raised my hands in surrender. Heaven forbid. As we turned to leave, Saul murmured, We done? Almost. Let's wait for Kramer to file it under things Wolfe told me so. Kramer's voice followed us out. Goodwin? I turned. If Wolfe's got something solid, I'll listen. Once. Then I shut him down. Got it? Got it, I said. You're all heart, Inspector. He grunted, waving us away like a man swatting gnats. Outside, the fog had thickened into a respectable curtain. Saul and I walked the length of the pier in silence until we reached the car. The river lapped against pilings with lazy menace. Well, I said, at least the night wasn't wasted. Unless you count dry socks, Saul replied. By the time I got back to the brownstone, the clock read 1:30 and Fritz had turned the lights low. Wolfe naturally was awake, sitting in his office robe, a book open on his desk, as serene as a man awaiting proof of his own prophecy. You're late, he said. I was detained by fog, policemen, and moral decay. Here's your bedtime reading. I handed him the envelope. He removed the torn sheet carefully, studying it as if the handwriting might confess. Carlin's, he said at last, without doubt. Matches signatures from his legal filings. Saul confirmed it. He nodded, eyes still on the page. A note, Blue Room Friday, and the figures, shipments falsified, revenues inflated, a pattern of theft disguised as commerce. Sounds like a motive with legs. He leaned back. No, a motive with fear. Someone killed to erase a ledger. Miss Vance's death was incidental, collateral to concealment. The wrong death, Mr. Goodwin. I dropped into my chair, lighting a cigarette. So, the lawyer's been cooking books, the fiancé's being blackmailed, and our heiress ends up dead for reading the menu. Who's our chef? He closed the ledger with a soft thump. Carlin fears exposure more than justice. That makes him either the architect or the scapegoat. We shall see which. He rang the bell cord once. Fritz appeared at the doorway, immaculate as ever, though his robe suggested interrupted slumber. Beer, Wolfe said. Fritz inclined his head and vanished. You realize, I said, Kramer's probably issuing a warrant for trespassing as we speak. Wolfe looked amused. If so, he will deliver it personally, at which point I shall offer him a chair and reason. Reason won't cut it when he sees you drinking evidence. He gave me a slow glare that said the discussion was over. Fritz returned with a chilled glass, condensation glistening like honesty on trial. Wolfe poured, savoured the first sip, and sighed. Archie, record this. At Pier 49, documents destroyed to conceal embezzlement. The destruction not the homicide, was the act's purpose. I rolled a sheet into the typewriter and started pounding keys. Title it what? He considered. The Wrong Death, he said softly. The typewriter clacked under my fingers while he drank in silence, eyes half closed in thought. Outside, a foghorn moaned down the Hudson like the city's guilty conscience calling for confession. When the page was done, I signed it with a flourish and said, "If Kramer arrests us, I want it noted that I opposed the waterfront operation from the start." Wolfe opened one eye, noted and disbelieved. Fritz reappeared to announce, "Bedtime, gentlemen." "Not quite," Wolfe said, rising heavily. "The orchids await. Good night, Archie." He vanished into the elevator, leaving me with the ledger's scent of smoke and sea and one question looping in my head. Who had really died for whose lie? I stubbed my cigarette, looked at the fog beyond the window, and muttered to no one, "If that was the wrong death, I'm not sure I want to meet the right one." When a lawyer dies with a pistol in his hand, it's either justice catching up or bookkeeping gone sentimental. I got the news from Saul at 11:30 sharp, just as I was halfway through dictating Wolfe's notes on the ledger. He'd telephoned from a pay booth near Madison Avenue, voice calm but edged like new steel. "Carlin's dead," Saul said. "Shot in his office. Police just got there." "Self-inflicted?" "That's what they're calling it. Pistol in his right hand. But there's a problem. There always is. Bullet holes on the left side of his head." That put a chill in the morning that Fritz's coffee couldn't cure. By the time I hung up, Wolfe was looking up from the pages with that heavy-lidded interest he reserves for murder and menu changes. "Carlin?" "Dead. Official story's suicide. Bullet on the wrong side," he grunted softly. "Too punctual. Men do not kill themselves on schedule to suit narrative symmetry." "That's poetic," I said. "But this one's got punctuation. A hole." He leaned back, closing his eyes. "Inform Inspector Kramer. He will come. He cannot resist the scent of paradox." Kramer arrived at 2, storm in his shoulders, cigar already scowling before he did. Rain still streaked his overcoat. He smelled of wet pavement and aggravation. Fritz met him at the door and ushered him in like an unwilling guest at a peace talk. "Wolfe," Kramer said, shaking rain off his hat. "If I thought you had a hand in this—" "You would need a warrant, Inspector," Wolfe said mildly. "Please sit. Beer?" "Save it." He dropped into the red leather chair opposite the desk. "Carlin's dead. Shot himself. Case closed, if I'm lucky." "If you are lucky," Wolfe murmured. "Truth will remain dormant." Kramer puffed smoke at the ceiling. "You always talk like a funeral sermon." The man left a note. "Oh?" Wolfe's brows rose an inch. "What variety of contrition?" Kramer handed me a folded sheet in an evidence sleeve. Typed. Says he couldn't live with his part in Miss Vance's death. Ends with "forgive me." Pretty standard. Wolfe didn't reach for it. "And yet you bring it here." Kramer's jaw worked the cigar. "Because the DA wants the case shut. Fast. The papers are screaming about rich women dying and lawyers eating their guns, but—" he hesitated. Rare for him. "Something smells off." "That would be morality decaying in proximity to expedience," Wolfe said. "I was thinking more like jasmine," I put in. Kramer shot me a look. "What?" "Saul said the office reeked of it. Same scent we found in the blue room, same as the coral lipstick." Kramer grunted. "You think the lady with the perfume paid Carlin a visit before he pulled the trigger?" "I think," I said, "that if she did, she left before the bang or after." He turned back to Wolfe. "You see what I'm dealing with? Wisecrack's theory is no proof." Wolfe pressed his fingertips together. "The bullet's entrance point. Left side?" "Yeah, but he's right-handed. Could have used his left." "Could have," Wolfe said. "Men could do many improbable things, write farewell notes with unfamiliar diction, die conveniently, absolve the living with a single sentence. Did you analyze the typewriter?" "Standard Underwood. His secretary says it's his." "Perhaps she would." That earned him a fresh puff of irritation. "Look, Wolfe, you've got a habit of turning corpses into riddles. I've got deadlines. Either Carlin killed himself or someone wanted me to think so. You got evidence otherwise?" "Not yet," Wolfe said. "Merely arithmetic. 2 deaths, each relieving another of guilt. Miss Vance dies to conceal crime. Carlin dies to complete confession. A symmetry too elegant for chance. Kramer frowned, chewing that over. You saying somebody framed his death to look like repentance? I am saying, Wolfe replied, that Carlin feared exposure, not guilt. His suicide serves the wrong end. Absolution without redemption. A confession is useless if it absolves the wrong guilt. I leaned back. Then we're halfway through the sermon. Kramer snorted. Fine. Preach all you like. I've got a press leak, a widow screaming, and a DA on my neck. You want to help? Give me something that'll keep the case open 48 hours. Wolfe reached for the bell cord. Fritz, beer. Kramer waved it off. Not this time. Wolfe regarded him as though he'd refused oxygen. A pity. The malt might have softened your skepticism. Save your malt, I want names. You have them, Wolfe said. Holden, possibly his cousin by affection, Miss Delia Vance. Both profit by Eleanor Vance's silence. Holden's alibi holds. So it did, Wolfe murmured, until Carlin died to guarantee it. That silenced the room a beat. Even the rain outside paused to listen. Kramer broke it first. All right, say you're right. Carlin's death was staged. By who? By whoever stood to inherit safety from his demise, I added, and had access to jasmine perfume. Kramer gave me a long, tired look. You think perfume's evidence? I think it lingers where bullets don't, I said. He groaned. Goodwin, one of these days your mouth's going to need a permit. Apply at City Hall, I told him. Wolfe's voice cut in, deep and calm. Archie, enough. He turned to Kramer. Inspector, you require time. I request 48 hours to produce coherence. After that, arrest whomever you please. You will have my report. Kramer eyed him. You don't make requests. You issue ultimatums. I am weary, Wolfe said. Take it as you prefer. Kramer ground out his cigar in the tray. 48 hours. After that, I start handing out warrants like menus. He stood, shoulders sagging under bureaucracy. If you're wrong, Wolfe, you're going to have more than indigestion. I am never wrong, Wolfe said mildly. Only premature. Kramer shook his head, heading for the door. At the threshold, he stopped. All right, Wolfe, I'll wait. But if I get blindsided by the press again, I'm pinning the tail on your ego. Your candor does you credit, Wolfe said. The door shut behind him with a weary finality. Rain pattered on the window panes like polite applause. Wolfe sat motionless a moment, then finally reached for his beer. He's giving us 48 hours, I said. We've had less time to cook eggs. Wolfe sipped, eyes half-lidded. You will assemble all available correspondence between Carlin and Miss Vance. Seek any mention of Blue Room or Friday engagements. Consult Saul. I will think. That's a switch, I said. Usually you eat first. I have eaten. Not since breakfast. He gave me a look that could have wilted orchids. Do not play nursemaid to my metabolism. I will dine at 8. Fine. You think while I do the legwork. Maybe I'll find another corpse to keep us busy. He ignored that. His gaze had turned inward, where logic lived and sentiment wasn't welcome. I took the note from the evidence sleeve and studied it again. The type was neat, the words brief. Forgive me. Whoever typed it had steady hands, or cold ones, and at the top corner, faint but real, was a smear of coral lipstick. Wolfe, I said quietly, the note's been kissed. He looked up, eyes narrowing. Kissed? Lipstick, same shade as at the Blue Room. He exhaled through his nose slowly. Then the note is not his, it is hers. Delia Vance? He nodded once. The wrong woman writing the wrong confession for the wrong man. That's a lot of wrongs. Indeed, he said, it will take one right to correct them. He set the note on the blotter, smoothing the sleeve flat, then leaned back, closing his eyes. Fritz reappeared at the doorway, silent as custom. Dinner at 8, sir? Yes, something restorative. Yes, sir. Fritz vanished again. I pocketed my notebook, still eyeing the evidence. You sure we're not just chasing perfume and philosophy? Perfume, Wolfe said, opening his eyes, is evidence the senses may misread. Philosophy is evidence the mind refines. Between them lies truth. Find Saul. That was dismissal, pure and cold. I headed for the door, pausing only to grab my hat. As I stepped out into the wet evening, the The scent of jasmine seemed to follow me down the steps. Maybe imagination, maybe memory, but either way it had better be leading somewhere before Kramer's 48 hours ran out. Inside, behind me, Wolfe's voice drifted through the half-open door, soft but certain. "A confession absolving the wrong guilt," he murmured, "is the most efficient lie of all." The orchids were looking smug that afternoon, which made 3 of us. Wolfe was in the plant rooms, lecturing them on deceit, and I was sprawled in the chair by the glass table pretending to take notes. The air smelled like expensive humidity and philosophical trouble. Sunlight filtered through the glass ceiling, catching on the rows of cattleyas and dendrobiums like jewels in a crime exhibit. Wolfe had been at it since 4, his sacred orchid hours extended. I'd long ago learned that interrupting him during that window was a religious offence, right up there with misquoting Latin or serving warm beer. He moved between the benches like a high priest, fingers brushing petals with the delicacy of a safecracker. "Observe, Archie," he said at last, turning toward me with a scowl that passed for serenity. "The genus Ophrys, nature's own fraud." I raised an eyebrow. "Looks harmless enough to me. If you've seen one flower, you've seen them all, unless one pulls a gun." He ignored me. "This one imitates the female of an insect species so precisely that the male attempts copulation with it. Pollination by deception, perpetuated through lust, a fitting parallel to humanity." "Sure," I said. "Only the human version usually ends with a bill instead of seeds." He snorted, straightening to his full girth. "You are impervious to metaphor." "On the contrary, I'm drowning in it. If you're building up to comparing Carlin to a pollinated beetle, go ahead. I can take it." He gave me a glare designed to prune insolence at the root, then turned back to the orchids. The rhythmic hiss of misting valves filled the silence. For half an hour he said nothing. I was about to drift off when Fritz appeared at the doorway, discreet as a conscience. "Sir," he said softly, "a delivery note was left with this morning's groceries. It mentions the Vance address. I thought perhaps—" "Let me see it," Wolfe interrupted. Fritz produced a folded slip from his pocket and handed it over. Wolfe read it once, then again, brows knitting. "Flowers," he murmured. "Delivered the morning after Miss Vance's death. Addressed to Miss D. at her residence." I sat up. "Miss D? You thinking Delia Vance, the cousin?" He looked at me, eyes narrowing. "Or someone who wished to be perceived as such. Fritz, from which florist?" "It says Belmont Flowers, sir." Wolfe nodded. "Thank you. That will be all." Fritz withdrew, silent as always. I whistled. So somebody sent sympathy blooms to a dead woman's apartment, addressed to a name that could pass for the family. That's either dumb or daring. "Daring," Wolfe said, "the reckless sort that accompanies concealment." He crossed to the potting table, where a purple vanda spread like royalty in exile. "Archie, the ledgers Miss Vance possessed contained evidence of embezzlement. She used them as leverage. Against whom?" "Carlin said Holden, but he's already been exonerated by convenience." "Precisely." He turned, eyes bright. "She was not extorting Holden. She was blackmailing someone else, someone with greater access to both the ledgers and her trust." "Carlin?" I asked. "Too obvious. His death was insurance, not guilt. Consider—" He lifted a watering can, pouring slowly as if the answer were suspended in the drops. "The flowers, ordered the morning after her death from a payphone near Pier 49 to her address, under a name approximating Delia." "Meaning," I said, "whoever sent them wanted the delivery record to suggest Delia without actually being traceable to her, maybe to plant suspicion." "Plant," he said approvingly. "An apt verb." Just then the house phone buzzed in the office below. I went to answer, leaving him among his floral conspirators. It was Saul Pantzer, as punctual as the morning paper. "Got something," he said. "Traced the florist's delivery order. Paid in cash, $5 even, no card. The call to place it came from a payphone 2 blocks off the pier, the same booth Carlin used last week to call his secretary." "That booth is getting more traffic than Grand Central," Saul chuckled. "Want me to stake it out?" "Do it. And Saul, if a lady smelling like jasmine shows up, don't buy her flowers. Copy that." He hung up. When I climbed back upstairs, Wolfe was still lecturing the orchids, but this time the tone had shifted. He was reasoning, not reciting. "Nature," he said without turning, has perfected the art of concealment through imitation. The office deceives not by hiding, but by pretending. Miss Vance's killer employed the same stratagem. Pretending what? I asked, leaning against the frame. That she herself was Miss Vance. I blinked. Run that again. He turned. Suppose the blackmailer was the cousin, Miss Delia Vance. She uses Eleanor's name to issue threats. Letters, calls, perhaps meetings. Eleanor discovers it too late and threatens exposure. The cousin silences her, then continues the ruse long enough to destroy evidence. Flowers to her own alias, a gesture to maintain illusion, elegant in its audacity. I let out a low whistle. You mean Delia's been impersonating the victim and framing the rest? He inclined his head. Impersonation, Archie, is a form of survival among orchids and humans alike. The predator thrives by resemblance. Then that note on Carlin's desk, forgive me, was dictated, not written, he said. Under duress or posthumously fabricated. Which means the jasmine wasn't perfume, I added. It was calling card. He closed his eyes briefly. Your obtuseness occasionally is fertile. Thanks, I said. I'll have it printed on my business card. A faint smile creased his face, Wolfe's version of applause. Do not let it go to your head. It has little room to expand. He turned back to the orchids. We will confirm this hypothesis. Contact Saul again. Have him follow the florist's delivery boy if possible. The record may still exist. And ask Lon Cohen whether the Gazette Society page has yet printed Miss Delia's public statements. I suspect she will soon express profound grief. I jotted a note. You really think she's bold enough to show face? She must. A mimic thrives only while seen. Downstairs I phoned Lon. He answered between deadlines. Archie, if this is another request for front-page exposure, forget it. The DA already called me twice. Relax, Lon. I just need your morgue files. Anything on Miss Delia Vance since her cousin's death. Easy. She gave a quote yesterday to the Chronicle. Said her cousin was misunderstood but loved. Picture ran beside a photo of her leaving Belmont Flowers with a white box. Want a copy? Please, I said. You're a saint with ink on his halo. He snorted. Buy me dinner instead. I'm running it over. When I brought the clipping upstairs, Wolfe was arranging a phalaenopsis, the petals white as courtroom marble. I handed him the paper. He studied the photo. There, he said, note the box. The same embossed wrapping the florist uses. She collected her own delivery. So she sends herself flowers to her dead cousin's apartment, then picks them up for the papers. Smart. Smartness, Wolfe said, is the refuge of the guilty. The clock chimed 11. He glanced toward it with distaste. Orchid hours are over. Time to descend into the human swamp, I asked. Regrettably, bring the ledger fragments and the note. We will prepare for the inspector's inevitable return. As we moved toward the office, Fritz intercepted us with a silver tray bearing a folded telegram. This just came, sir. Wolfe opened it, scanning quickly. His face hardened. What is it? From Saul, the florist's boy identified the customer who placed the order. Female, wore gloves, veil, and carried a white carnation, paid in cash. Carnation, I said. Not jasmine. She would not wear her own scent while impersonating another, Wolfe said grimly. She adapts like an ophrys, to deceive. He moved to his desk, sitting with a weight that made the chair groan in sympathy. Archie, dictation. I rolled in a fresh sheet. Shoot. To Inspector Kramer, from Nero Wolfe. The death of Julius Carlin was murder, not suicide. The perpetrator is alive, female, and in possession of the surviving ledger pages. Her identity is that of Miss Delia Vance, or one claiming such. Proof will follow. Signed. He paused, then added, with irritation. I typed it clean, carboned a copy, and looked up. Want me to send it now? After lunch, he said. Fritz will require 10 minutes to prepare the pâté, and I refuse to commit revelation on an empty stomach. I grinned. That's practically civic-minded. He lifted a brow. Civilization, Archie, depends on digestion. While Fritz announced lunch, Wolfe rose and cast one last glance toward the orchids through the glass door. They are predators, he said quietly. Beautiful, treacherous, and patient, as are the women who mimic them. Let's hope the inspector's got better luck pruning his. He didn't answer. He only reached for his beer, and as the foam settled, I thought of the orchids upstairs. Lovely, deceitful, and thriving in perfect light, just like Miss Delia Vance, until Wolfe decided to pull her from her pot. If trouble ever took up singing, it would sound like Delia Vance. The Coral Room was one of those midtown spots where the lights were low, the cocktails high, and the women knew which they preferred. I'd been there before, strictly for research, of course, but this time the assignment came with lipstick attached. She was on stage when I entered, her voice a smoky thread wrapping itself around Cole Porter's Night and Day. She wore coral, the exact shade I'd seen on that glass beside the heiress's corpse, and the spotlight made her skin gleam like a moral dilemma. The crowd didn't know they were watching a suspect. That was the thing about Manhattan nightlife. Everyone looked guilty, but only a few earned it. When she finished, the applause rolled in like a tide. I waited until she slipped off stage through the curtain, then followed the backstage corridor lined with wilted bouquets and unwashed dreams. A stagehand tried to stop me. I showed him a smile with credentials. Delia was at her dressing table, removing her earrings with the lazy precision of a cat after dinner. The mirror caught me first. "Well," she said, not turning, "if it isn't the man with too much curiosity." "Guilty," I said, "but on parole." She faced me, one brow arched. "You're Archie Goodwin, Nero Wolfe's mouthpiece." "Legman," I corrected. "The mouthpiece part's upstairs." Her laugh had edges. "What brings you here? Flattery or interrogation?" "Both," I said. "You can choose the order." She reached for a cigarette, lit it, and exhaled a ribbon of smoke toward the ceiling. "If it's about my cousin, I've already told the police what I know." "Then humour me. You were at the Riverside apartment that night." Her hand froze a fraction before the next drag. "I was. Eleanor called me, said she needed to talk. When I got there, she was already—" Her voice caught perfectly like a line in rehearsal. "Dead. I panicked. I left." "Without calling anyone?" I was frightened. I'd been drinking. I gave her my best skeptical grin. "Sure. And you ran straight to your dressing room, applied fresh lipstick, and sang your grief to the late show." She met my eyes, cool as ice on gin. "You think I killed her?" "I think you have excellent timing." The silence that followed was the expensive kind. She tapped ash into a glass tumbler, then smiled faintly. "You men always want a villain with lipstick. It makes guilt prettier." "Depends on the shade," I said. "That coral of yours, for instance, it photographs well, almost identical to the print we found on a glass at the scene." Her eyes flickered, then steadied. "Coincidence. I've worn it for years." "Sure," I said. "Since before the papers mentioned it, apparently." That did it. A small, involuntary intake of breath. She covered fast, blowing smoke through a smile. "I read things. People talk." "Not that fast," I said. "The Gazette held that detail till morning." Her laugh was too bright. "You're clever, Mr. Goodwin. It's a shame you waste it playing errand boy. That's a matter of taste. But yours runs to forged ledgers, dead lawyers, and sympathy bouquets." She stood abruptly. "You'd better leave." "Now we're in agreement." I tipped my hat. "If you remember anything helpful, call me, but make sure the line's not tapped, yours or your conscience." Her voice followed me out, soft but dangerous. "You're enjoying this too much." "Occupational hazard," I said. Outside, the night smelled like rain and perfume. Hers, jasmine again. The cab ride back to West 35th gave me time to wonder whether I was more irritated by her lies or impressed by her style. Wolfe would call that moral confusion. I call it Manhattan. When I got in, it was close to midnight. Wolfe was still in his chair, book open, beer half finished, orchids dark behind the glass doors. He looked up as I entered. "You've seen her?" "Yeah," I said, hanging my coat. "Delia Vance. She sings like sin and lies like scripture. Admitted she was there, swears she found the body and fled. She slipped once, mentioned the lipstick and the papers before the Gazette did." Wolfe's eyes sharpened. "The papers." He set down the glass. "So she knew of the ledgers." "Or wrote them," I said. Saul confirmed the florist link. The flowers were ordered from a booth near the pier. My bet, she placed it herself to look sympathetic. Only she overplayed the hand. Wolfe grunted. "Phooey. Sympathy is the easiest counterfeit." He closed the book, interlacing his fingers over his stomach. She murdered Carlin, not for money but to erase her own name from the ledger. The lawyer threatened exposure and she silenced him. Her cousin was merely collateral, killed for possession of the same evidence. That's poetic, I said. You sure? Certain, he replied. Miss Delia Vance performs innocence as she performs melody, expertly, until the last note, but the encore will be discordant. Meaning we call Kramer? Not yet. He will arrive soon enough, driven by habit or rage. Until then, write your report. I sighed, crossing to the desk. You ever notice the more women kill for appearances, the worse they are at makeup? Your levity, Wolfe said, is as inescapable as it is tasteless. Proceed. I rolled in a sheet, started typing, and said, If I ever go missing, tell Kramer to start at the Coral Room. He didn't look up. You lack the voice for tragedy. Yeah, I said, but I seem to find the company. There are few sounds less pleasant than Inspector Kramer's knock when he's been reading the morning paper. It's not a knock, really. It's an indictment with hinges. At exactly 10:27 a.m., it rattled the front door of the brownstone like a subpoena with brass knuckles. Fritz opened it, brave man, and ushered Kramer into the office where Wolfe and I were halfway through the day's mail and a pitcher of orange juice. Kramer didn't bother with greetings. He flung a folded newspaper onto Wolfe's desk. The headline spread across the page like a rash. Wolfe hides Blue Room killer. Read it, he growled. Then tell me you're not enjoying the free publicity. I took the paper before Wolfe could, partly to spare the furniture. Gazette, front page above the fold, I read aloud. Inside sources reveal famed detective Nero Wolfe obstructs investigation into heiress's murder, refuses cooperation with police. You're famous again, boss. Wolfe's jaw tightened. Archie, who wrote it? Byline says Lon Cohen, but the hand smells like editorial aftershave. They probably carved it up. Kramer pulled out a cigar and jabbed it toward Wolfe. You think I enjoy this? Half the city thinks I'm your errand boy. The other half thinks you're sheltering the killer. Wolfe's eyes went glacial. Pfui. I shelter reason, Inspector, not criminals, though the distinction eludes your superiors. Kramer ignored that. You want to know the worst part? We got an anonymous letter this morning claiming you're protecting the guilty. It came to my desk, typed, unsigned, postmarked Midtown. I whistled. Well, we've moved up in the world, from suspects to accessories. Don't joke, Goodwin, Kramer snapped. The commissioner's talking about a warrant for obstruction. Wolfe rose, a slow, seismic event. Inspector, the idiocy of bureaucracy never fails to astonish. I will not dignify libel printed by imbeciles nor threats issued by them. Kramer pointed the cigar like a weapon. Then dignify this. The DA's office wants you to hand over every scrap you've got on the Vance case. Notes, statements, ledger fragments, all of it. That, Wolfe said coldly, will not occur. It'll occur, Kramer said, or I'll send Stebbins with a team and a warrant. I saw it coming, the flare behind Wolfe's eyes, the kind that meant intellectual Armageddon. Mr. Kramer, he said softly, you are welcome to send your bulldogs, but if they cross my threshold, I shall have them sit for tea while I demonstrate precisely how incompetence breeds calamity. Now, unless you intend to arrest me, leave. The silence that followed was thick enough to butter. Kramer looked at him, then at me, and muttered, You've got until tomorrow night. Then the gloves come off. He stormed out, trailing cigar smoke and headlines. When the door shut, Wolfe stood motionless. Then he spoke, each word precise as a knife stroke. Archie, the Gazette. Already ahead of you? I picked up the phone and dialed Lon Cohen's number. He answered on the first ring, sounding like a man who'd slept in guilt. Archie, I swear. Save it, Lon. The boss is considering adopting you as a cautionary tale. What happened? The editor rewrote my copy, Lon said. They wanted heat, not facts. I tried to fix it, but by the time it hit the press. Too late, I finished. You owe me dinner. Dinner and a tip, he said grimly. That anonymous letter Kramer got. The envelope was mailed from the same block as your brownstone. I paused. You're kidding. I wish. Somebody's setting you up, Archie. Or Wolfe. Maybe both. Be careful who you let in. I hung up and turned to Wolfe. Lon says the letter was mailed from our neighborhood. So congratulations. You're not just famous. You're local. He didn't answer. He was staring at the Gazette headline again, face carved in stone, Then, without warning, he slammed the newspaper shut. "This," he said, "is intolerable. The cretinous press presumes to distort truth, the police connive in folly, and my name is dragged through the muck. I withdraw." I blinked. Withdraw? "I am finished with this investigation." He paced, a rare sight, like watching an eclipse. "I will not continue under the spectre of accusation." "Fine," I said. "Let the wrong murder stay solved. Maybe the Orchids can file the appeal." His head snapped toward me. "Archie." "Don't Archie me," I said. "You're quitting because the paper's got your goat? Since when do you care what the Gazette thinks? You've been called worse by waiters." He glared. "Your impertinence is exactly what you pay for," I cut in. "Carlin's dead, Delia's playing innocent, and someone's mailing poison pen letters from down the block. You really want to let them write the ending?" His nostrils flared, then subsided. Silence held for a long minute. Then finally he exhaled, slow and deliberate. "Archie," he said, quieter now, "your loyalty is excessive." "Sure," I said. "It's a disease, unreported." He sank back into his chair, the crisis fading into something colder. Resolve. "Very well. They wish to make me villain and confessor. Let them. We shall invite them all to tea." I raised an eyebrow. "All?" "Inspector Kramer, Miss Vance, the operatives, the press if they dare. Tomorrow evening at 8. The brownstone shall serve as both parlour and courtroom." "Nice. What's on the menu? Beer and retribution?" "Truth," he said. "Serve chilled." He reached for the bell cord. "Fritz!" The Swiss maestro appeared within seconds, probably expecting a culinary emergency. "Yes, sir." "Arrange for an additional setting at dinner tomorrow, possibly several, and telephone Mr. Pantzer, Mr. Durkin, and Mr. Cather. Tell them to be here at 7:30 sharp." "Very good, sir." When Fritz departed, Wolfe looked at me. "Archie, you will also notify Miss Vance that her presence is requested, cordially. She will come, though she will hate herself for it." "Should I send a corsage with the invitation?" He almost smiled. "No, let her bring her own." The grandfather clock struck 11, punctuating the declaration like a judge's gavel. "You really think Kramer will show?" I asked. "He will come to accuse," Wolfe said, "and stay to listen." I leaned against the desk, arms crossed. "And if the real killer doesn't?" He took a deep breath, the fury now distilled into calm. "Then I shall name her anyway," I grinned. "Sounds like a party." "It will be," Wolfe said, "for the truth, and for our vindication." He reached for his beer, poured with ritual precision, and raised it slightly toward me. "To survival, Mr. Goodwin. Ours, if not theirs." "Cheers," I said. "And for the record, I'm putting Lon's dinner on your tab." "Phooey," Wolfe muttered, but he drank. And somewhere outside, Manhattan kept reading lies while the brownstone prepared to print the last word. The brownstone was dressed for judgment. Fritz had drawn the curtains, leaving only the twin lamps glowing on Wolfe's desk and the fire smouldering like a slow verdict. I'd polished the brass ashtray out of habit. It seemed a shame for the climactic moment of the case to arrive with cigarette ashes from last week's deadbeat still in it. At precisely 8 o'clock, the doorbell rang with the punctuality of doom. Fritz, immaculate as a statue of innocence, admitted the guests in the order of their consciences. First came Inspector Kramer, cigar clenched like a weapon and rain on his overcoat. Stebbins loomed behind him, carrying the kind of expression that usually precedes frisking. Then Saul Panzer slipped in, silent and solid, followed by a thin man from the district attorney's office whose name I instantly forgot and whose importance was even less memorable. Last came Delia Vance, wrapped in mink, coral mouth perfect, eyes the exact shade of regret that sells perfume. She paused on the threshold like an actress hitting her mark. Wolfe, behind his desk, didn't rise. He merely inclined his head, the barest courtesy extended to beauty under suspicion. "Please be seated," he said. His tone could have chilled soup. Kramer chose the red chair nearest the fire and lit up immediately. "All right, Wolfe," he grunted. "You called the party. Let's hear the floor show." Delia sank gracefully onto the settee. "If this is another of your little performances, Mr. Wolfe, I warn you." "Madam," Wolfe interrupted, "it is not a performance. It is an exorcism." That got everyone's attention. including mine. He folded his hands across his stomach. We are gathered to identify a murderer whose vanity surpassed her foresight. Miss Vance, you will forgive plain speech. Subterfuge has lost its audience. Delia's smile was faint, brittle. You think I killed my cousin? I think, Wolfe said, you killed your reflection. I felt that one land. Even Kramer glanced up from his cigar. Wolfe went on, voice steady, each word a brick laid in a wall. Let us review the progression. Your cousin, Miss Eleanor Vance, possessed ledgers revealing a chain of financial impropriety, embezzlements hidden in the accounts of the Carlin firm. She intended to expose them, but not altruistically. She planned to implicate you. She believed you had forged the original entries. That's a lie, Delia snapped. No, Wolfe said softly. It is the truth you attempted to bury beneath a second corpse. The DA observer cleared his throat. Mr. Wolfe, perhaps? Silence, Wolfe said, without raising his voice. It worked. The man folded. Wolfe gestured toward me. Mr. Goodwin, the exhibit. I handed over the photostat we'd made of the ledger fragments recovered from Pier 49, the ones with the burnt edges and the fatal line. Blue Room, Friday. Wolfe held it up like a relic. This entry, he said, records a scheduled meeting between Eleanor Vance and Carlin. She meant to trade the documents for a confession. Instead, she met her cousin, who had arrived first. When Eleanor realized the ledgers had been altered yet again, this time to obliterate the name of their true thief, she threatened exposure. Miss Delia Vance, in panic and fury, shot her. Delia rose halfway. That's absurd. Wolfe's hand lifted, commanding stillness. Absurdity seldom leaves fingerprints, but it leaves fragrance. The scent of jasmine at both scenes, the apartment and Carlin's office, was yours. So was the coral lipstick. You left it on the glass near Eleanor's body, and again, by design or carelessness, on the rim of Carlin's whiskey tumbler when you visited to ensure his silence. You killed him the following evening and arranged his suicide, but you could not change anatomy. The bullet entered his left temple. Carlin was right-handed. Kramer grunted. We already noted that. Yes, Inspector, but you did not note that the pistol belonged to Miss Vance, registered under her stage name Delia Dane. Mr. Panzer traced the purchase. Saul gave a modest nod. Same serial number. Lieutenant Stebbins checked it himself. Stebbins frowned. Yeah, checks out. Delia's voice trembled now. You can't prove I fired it. I need not, Wolfe said. You did more eloquently yourself. When you corrected me at our last meeting, you referred to the ledgers as papers before the press had done so. Only the killer or the dead could know their form. The room went still. Even the fire seemed to hold its breath. Wolfe leaned back. Your cousin meant to destroy you by exposure. You thought to save yourself by silencing her, unaware that in so doing you confirmed her accusation. Carlin discovered the forgery. You eliminated him as well. The flowers you sent to the Vance residence under the name Miss D were meant to appear as a gesture of mourning, but they served another purpose, to retrieve the remaining ledger pages delivered there by messenger. You burned them at Pier 49. Unfortunately, half-burned truth still illuminates. Delia's composure cracked like thin ice. You can't prove motive from ashes. On the contrary, Wolfe said, ashes are eloquent. They testify that someone feared light. Kramer sighed, grinding his cigar into the tray. All right, Wolfe. She's smart, but you're smarter. You got physical evidence? The ledger fragments, the pistol, the florist's order, and Mr. Goodwin's testimony, Wolfe replied. That will suffice. But if you require confession, he turned his gaze to Delia. I suspect vanity will oblige. She rose, trembling, then steadied herself with a sudden cold smile. You think you've beaten me? My cousin was going to ruin me, her own flesh and blood. I only wanted to stop her from spreading those lies. Carlin promised to help, but when he tried to blackmail me, Her voice faltered. The sentence finished itself in the silence. Kramer stood. That'll do. He motioned to Stebbins, who moved toward her with professional reluctance. Delia's eyes met mine for a second. Whatever she saw there, it wasn't triumph. It was pity she didn't want. Then she lifted her chin. You win, Mr. Wolfe. I hope you enjoy your reputation. I do not, Wolfe said quietly. Reputation is what others think of you. Character is what you cannot change. She laughed once, brittle as glass, before Stebbins guided her out. When the door closed, the office felt larger, emptier, and tired. Kramer lingered, pulling a fresh cigar from his pocket but not lighting it. "You're a damn nuisance, Wolfe," he said. "But a right one." Wolfe inclined his head. "I shall cherish that paradox." Kramer turned to me. "Goodwin, you ever think about joining the force? We could use someone who types faster than he talks." "Not if I have to trade Fritz's dinners for precinct coffee," I said. He grunted, half a laugh, half fatigue, and left with the DA man and Saul trailing behind. The front door shut, muffling the city. For a while, Wolfe sat staring into the fire. I cleaned ashtrays, refilled the beer, and tried not to look like a man waiting for applause. Finally he spoke. "It is intolerable," he said slowly, "to solve the wrong murder." I paused mid-pour. "Meaning we almost did?" "Meaning," he said, "that Eleanor Vance's death was merely the surface. The true crime was the desecration of trust, the belief that deceit could preserve dignity. Miss Delia Vance killed not from greed, but from humiliation." "Still counts," I said. "The DA won't downgrade to second degree for poetic motives." "Perhaps not." He reached for his beer. "But it clarifies the anatomy of guilt." I settled into my chair. "You're getting philosophical again. Should I fetch your orchids or a Bible?" He shot me a glance over the rim of his glass. "Archie, were I capable of conversion, it would be to silence." That'd be the day. We sat that way for a while, the old house breathing around us, the fire sighing. The case had wound itself out neatly, like one of Fritz's strudels cooling on the rack, but underneath was a taste of ashes. At 9, Fritz appeared at the doorway. "Dinner, gentlemen." Wolfe nodded. "Thank you, Fritz. A proper reward for endurance." I followed him toward the dining room, stretching the kinks out of my shoulders. "You know," I said, "for once everything lined up. Evidence, confession, timing, even Kramer's compliment had correct grammar." Wolfe grunted. "Do not tempt Providence. Tomorrow the papers will distort it." "Sure," I said, "but at least this time the lady's confession came with better timing." He paused at the threshold, gave me one of those looks that lands halfway between irritation and affection, and said, "Archie, your levity is incorrigible." "Yeah," I said, "but it keeps the lights on." He harumphed, disappeared into the dining room, and the door swung shut behind him with its usual air of finality. Upstairs, the orchids would be sleeping, and outside, Manhattan was already printing a new version of the truth. But down here, with the fire dying and Fritz's dinner waiting, I figured we'd earned one quiet night before the next headline tried to make a liar out of us again.